Hey guys, Brian here from LCS. Thanks for stopping by the channel. And today we're going to do something a little bit different with the live stream. I'm actually going to bring on a guest, James, or Indy Jim as he's known on Facebook. He is a comic book presser and cleaner, and I've actually used his services before, and he does great work. So we want to kind of just pick his brain a little bit and talk to him about comic book collecting and cleaning and pressing. Get a little bit more kind of behind the curtains look at how somebody goes about cleaning and pressing comic books. So let me bring him in. James, welcome to the channel, and thanks for agreeing to do an interview with me tonight.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into collecting and into comic book cleaning and pressing? Just kind of give us the little overview.
Oh, well, I actually started collecting comic books when I was about 5 years old, I suppose. My parents actually started buying comic books for me, and so like most other 5-year-olds, I didn't really take good care of them. I would read them and fold them into paper airplanes and trade them with my friends, and put them on my bicycle with clothes, clothespins or whatever. And so I did that. I was really about 10 years old before I started to realize the value of comic books from a collectible standpoint.
Okay.
So I started. I was old enough then to start kind of buying my own comic books, and I remember walking up to the local gas station and seeing, Giant Size X-Men #1 on the spinning rack. And of course, I had barely enough money to buy one when there was probably 30 there on the rack. But hindsight's always 20/20. So I started, I started thinking about, or consciously thinking about treating my comic books better. As I became like a young, in my early teens. So I started buying cheap bags and boards and kind of trying to protect them somewhat. And I actually started out, oddly enough, using my mother's clothes iron to start ironing comic books. And that actually, my dad actually thought of that one day. Because obviously paper is a substance that if you apply heat to it and pressure, it's the same as like cotton or any other fabric. If you apply the right amount of heat and pressure to it, it's gonna kind of change its shape and whatever.
Okay.
So, my dad started showing me how to press comic books on an ironing board, a long time ago. And I think back then we actually used wax paper. So I kind of learned quickly the value of starting out with a lower heat, right? Because if you get the press too hot, it's gonna melt whatever's inside of it. So
yeah, I've certainly done that with a pair of pants or a shirt.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like anything else, is trial and error. So there really weren't any comic book pressing supplies back then that I was even aware of. So I know it sounds kind of hokey or whatever to start out with using a clothes iron, but that's literally how I got my start. So I actually still have that iron. It's 60 years old or whatever, but actual clothes irons work well just because they have the angled tip in the front, so you can actually direct. If you've got a really small anomaly on a book or a really small spine tick on the spine that a full press can't reach, you can actually use the tip of a clothes iron to remove a really small tick, because you've got really good leverage with it because they're nice and heavy, and you can just kind of get right where you get that tip of the iron right where you want it to be able to effectively remove a small tick. And you can also, if you've got a book that's otherwise perfect but has a few small ticks here and there, it might not even be necessary to go over to press the whole book. You might be able to get away with just pressing 2 or 3 small areas with a hand press of any kind. And they obviously they make hand presses that are specifically designed for that. But you can use a clothes iron as well if you're familiar and have enough experience to be able to do that.
Okay.
And that prevents you from having to press the whole book just for 2 or 3 small issues that you can easily correct by hand. So,
and I'm sure the iron from your, that your dad used is probably made a lot different than the irons, that they make today. It's probably a little heavier, a little sturdier.
oh, sure. Exactly. Yeah. And that actually works to your advantage as far as like they make these small hand presses now that you can use for comic books, but they're literally that you can kind of hold one of them in just one hand, and they're kind of small and they're not real heavy.
Okay.
So you have to try to push down real hard to get the leverage going. And so with an older clothes iron, you can kind of just let the weight of the iron do its work, work for you instead of trying to push down real hard.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and now, how did you transition from doing that initially to some of the more modern tools, the pressers that are used kind of today?
Sure, I did that. So I took some time off from collecting. When I went to high school, and then I got into college, and I was busy with all that. And then after college, I kind of dug my collection back out of the mothballs, and I started. I just kind of started working on them individually, because I still had a lot of the books that I had in my collection were from when I was younger, and I remember I used to go to the pool all the time with comic books.
Oh, geez. Okay.
My friends were all busy, like flirting with girls or whatever, running around, chasing around the pool, and I was sitting there reading comic books. So, but in any event, I had a lot of books like that had some moisture damage to them and whatnot. So I kind of slowly started going through my collection, working on those books to try to get them back into good shape, because they held a lot of memory, or they held a lot of memories for me when I was younger. So I wanted to try to preserve them as much as possible. And but I quickly noticed that I couldn't. There's no way that I could use a hand iron on every comic book. So I started doing some research, and I had a friend, and this was way before the internet, of course. So I had a friend that actually made T-shirts. He was on a baseball team, and their baseball team would make their own T-shirts. And so that's how I was introduced to a T-shirt press, basically.
Right.
And that's
so
basically
like a transfer press, right?
Transfer press, yeah.
Right,
that's basically what most presses are, even to this day. Is they're transfer presses. I mean, they're not technically they're not called comic book presses, quote unquote. They're transfer presses. And so I invested in I think back then it was literally like a $40 press, and I was amazed that I could just set the time and temperature, and then just press a comic book, just press it like like you were doing a panini sandwich or something. You just press it, wait a few minutes, and then open it up, and it, I was amazed at how much better it made everything look. And of course there was a lot of trial and error, and I ruined some books, along the way, but that's really the only way you can learn,
Yeah, and that's something I've heard a lot of. It's kind of trial and error, right? You take a low value book, or a book that you don't mind if you destroyed it, and really just try some of these techniques out, and just kind of see how it goes, and you learn as you go.
And there's really no substitute for learning as you go, because I have guys ask me all the time. They'll say, I just bought a press. Can you tell me how to use it properly? And my first response to them is, I could literally explain it to you and talk for 10 hours straight, and still not explain everything fully to somebody, because a lot of it is just, you have to do it. Just start doing it yourself. Right.
Right.
You can kind of give somebody pointers on how to begin, and, some general ideas as far as what temperatures are good. What times are good, but it's still going to be trial and error to some degree, because it's all every book is going to be a little bit different.
Right. And I know I've noticed that just in some of the books I've picked up recently, you have cardboard stock covers, you have glossy covers, and back in the day when we probably first started collecting, the books weren't as fancy. And then in the 90s, they had a lot of foil covers. So there's been a lot of different types of books over the years.
Just look at even the interior pages anymore. They're all glossy and fancy.
Right.
I was amazed, when I was collecting, comic books were 20 cents, right? In the early to mid 70s. And then I remember I took some time off, and then when I started back up collecting again, I noticed the price had gone way up. But then I also noticed that the interior pages started getting glossier and more, and had more color to them and all that. And so it's pressing a 6-year-old book as compared to pressing a 6-month-old book is a completely different process.
Right.
So
yeah, it's a lot of trial and error with the different types of books and then the different tools that you're using. So yeah, no, I've done a little bit of research on my own. I've been following so you have primarily your pressing and cleaning services done via a Facebook group, right? So I mean, that's where you make contact. So that's where I've kind of found you and started watching some of the content that you would post there and just some of the tips. And that's really, and then I started doing based on that, I started doing some other research, found some other content on YouTube and other places. But yeah, I mean, generally it always seems like it's really no one book is the same, and it's a lot of trial and error, to be successful with, increasing the quality of a book. So
definitely. Yeah. And I really enjoy, the advent of all social media and all this, accessibility to everything. I've really enjoyed that from the aspect of being able to meet a lot of new people, like you, for example, and make a lot of customers that are also friends, and you start up relationships with people, and that's enjoyable. And because before I started doing this, before I started my group and all that, I was pressing locally here for a couple businesses and friends, and I was doing a lot of it for myself, and working on my own books a lot, and my son and all that. But it's really been enjoyable, kind of expanding into into some of these groups, and I've really met a lot of awesome people, and some other people.
It's a good community. It's a very, because we're all, we have a common goal, right? We love collecting comic books. We love the art. We love the stories. Exactly. And then, some people want to increase value on some of their books. So yeah, it is a very, and
increasing the value of a book can either be a monetary increase, or it can be a sentimental increase, where you have a book that you want to conserve as much as possible. You want to conserve as much as possible because it might have been your father's when he was younger, or you might have had it when you might have had these books when you were younger, and you want to preserve them as much as possible for your children or whatever. So there's always going to be different reasons why you want to preserve and potentially slab books and have them graded. It's not always the monetary aspect. Sometimes it can be the kind of the sentimental.
Right. No, agreed. I mean, there's some great covers, Spider-Man covers that I remember, collecting as a teenager that I would love to have back and slabbed and just, to collect, to have on the wall, or to show people, this was, I have a Spider-Man from the year and month that I was born, and so this, I can look at the book and say that book is as old as me. So yeah, there's some.
And every time you look at a book like that, you think, it kind of makes you, kind of gives you a sense of pride and enjoyment, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, whenever I look through my collection, I see, and whenever I see, literally each book literally elicits a different emotion in me, because I can remember when I bought it, where I was, how old I was, or whatever, literally for every single book. And that's, it's really enjoyable when you're able to do that.
Right. I used to walk up to my local convenience store or stationery store and buy books, and you can't do that today. You basically have to go to a comic shop. But I used to be able to take my $2-3 that I had in my pocket and walk up and buy, 3 or 4 different books. I started collecting a little bit later. I collected like in the early 80s. So books were in the, 65 cent, 75 cent range, but still, if I had $5 in my pocket, I could still buy, 4 or 5 books and, just pick them up at the local, convenience store. So.
Yeah. And who would have thought back then that it would turn into such a profitable thing as far as the return on your investment, right? You take $5 and you buy 7 or 8 comics, and now look at what they're worth,
Oh yeah, no, I know. I mean, I knew that when I first started collecting, it was more about enjoyment of the books and the reading and the art. But I knew, that there potentially could be value, so I started to store them properly, bag and board them, and just make sure they were stored properly. But never thought that I could buy a book for 75 cents and it'd be worth $500.
Exactly.
Today, or $1,000, or whatever the book is, and whatever the amount. So,
and that's really that's the best way to get into the collecting of comic books is you actually enjoy doing it and you love doing it. Not, the monetary aspect. If you're getting into buying comic books just for the monetary aspect, then you're really not a collector. You're just you're a flipper.
Yeah, a flipper, right? Right.
But and I wouldn't think flipping is overly enjoyable from an emotional standpoint, right?
It's really just the way to make money, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Which nothing wrong with that, right? But you have to.
Yeah, we all need to make money, right? So
you have to have a good balance of the two. So,
right.
Yeah.
So what about tips about like cleaning a book or removing stickers or tape or things like that? What are some of your best tips, or some of the things that you do when you come across a book with, let's say like a sticker or a price sticker on it?
Yeah, well, typically, cleaning a book, there's several different ways to clean a book, but I think that the proper way for me anyway, to look at it is that the best way to clean a book is to dry clean a book. Dry clean meaning you're not adding any solvents to help clean it, like any liquids of any kind.
Okay.
And that's, it's probably a topic for another day, but restoration, if you use restorative methods on a book, if it's determined that you actually used restorations methods on a book, when it comes to it being graded, then it can receive like a separate label, a restoration label, which technically drops the value of a book, especially if you're looking to like sell it or as an investment. You would want to try to stay away from that because it does devalue the book. But if you have a book that's been in your family or been with you for a long time, and you want to just make it look better, then if you can restore it if you don't have plans to sell it, because it will improve the looks of it, but it won't improve the monetary value of a book. So I try to do dry cleaning most of the time. I typically don't restore books for customers. I've done it before, and I'm familiar with how to do it.
Okay.
But I typically won't do it for a customer. I've done it for myself and friends and what have you, but I really don't. I'm more old school when it comes to that, so I typically won't do it for a client. Even if they ask me, I'll just refer them to someone else. That is willing to do restoration.
Okay.
As far as like things like residue on books, stickers, and what have you, there's a certain way to do that. You can introduce heat, like whether it be like a hair dryer. You can strategically use a hair dryer to heat up the sticker and heat up that area to the point where, and you'll be able to tell pretty easily when you've gotten it to the right temperature to where it'll literally just kind of start peeling a little bit.
Okay. Kind of lift off then, right?
Starts lifting off somewhat, and then I like to take something. That's not sharp. I've used like a plastic knife, for example, or the tip of a plastic ballpoint pen. Something that's not sharp, but yet has like a little surface area to it, to where you can kind of start taking that and start lifting the sticker off the page without damaging the page. So you just kind of start slowly doing that, and it requires patience. You just kind of have to just stay there with the clothes iron and just keep working that sticker. And really, the best thing to do with a sticker, for example, is you don't want to start on one end and just keep going and then wind up and then peel it off at the other end. You want to start on one side, and then you want to kind of go around to the other side. And if it's a round sticker, you want to kind of start like on the north side of the sticker, and then go to the east side and maybe the west side. So you're basically kind of lifting it up as you go, so that when it finally lifts off, you're kind of in the center, in the center of the sticker. Because what happens a lot of times is if you just start on one side of the sticker and you're lifting it towards the other end, sometimes at the very end, when you lift it off, you can actually pull off part of the cover, because that end of the sticker that you're going to be that you try to pull off at the very end that area might not be as hot as the rest of the area was. So you can actually like pull a part of the cover off of it.
Oh, right. So you really want to kind of work the edges. A circle really doesn't have an edge.
Work the edges into the middle, because the middle is always going to be at the temperature you want to finally remove it, because all the edges have been at that same temperature. So the middle is going to be that temperature too when you lift it off. Okay. That probably sounds overly technical, but that's that's the best way to do it. As far as the most foolproof way to do it. So.
And what about, have you, and I think you have, I think I've seen some on your Facebook page where somebody will send in an already slab book, but they see some defects that they think a pressing could fix. So it cracked a slab, and then what are your general guidelines you think for somebody if they want to crack a slab and try to increase the grade on a book?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 kind of general guidelines when it comes to something like that. I mean, I guess the first guideline would be does the slab have what are called grader's notes? It's typically when a grading company grades a book, they'll include notes like maybe like there's certain anomalies on the book as they're grading it. They'll jot those down, and they'll include those in the notes. Sometimes a lot of times you have to pay for those notes if you want to see them. But
right.
if you have a membership to CGC, a couple of memberships allow for free graders notes. So that's one way to determine whether a book is could require a cracking and reslabbing, is depending on what the graders notes say. But another aspect would be like visually speaking. You can a lot of times you can just kind of look at the book and see, you can see dings and spine ticks and dirt, whatever. But the slabs obviously the book is behind 2 pieces of plastic. It's inside of the inner sleeve first.
Right.
And that sleeve is put inside of the slab, which is a thick plastic slab. So obviously, the book is behind 2 pieces of plastic, basically. So it's really hard to see anomalies because of that aspect. It is a lot easier if you take the slab and you hold it under a direct source of light, which would be like obviously an overhead light or whatever.
Right. Okay.
You want to just hold the slab. I have a slab right here, actually. Believe it or not, Submariner, signed by Joe Sinnott. You just kind of take the slab and just hold it under the light, and just kind of move the slab around at different angles. And that light source is gonna show every imperfection on the book itself. It's gonna cut right through the plastic, and it's gonna give you a more accurate view of what the book itself looks like. That's a good way to tell. And and actually, most older books that have been graded, it's pretty easy to tell if they've never been cleaned or pressed before, because obviously cleaning and pressing is kind of a newer, somewhat newer thing in the business, or in the collecting part. So especially like I guess the older books that have been slabbed, that were slabbed maybe 20 years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, most of them have probably never been cleaned and pressed because people would just send the books in to be graded without
Right.
cleaning or pressing them.
Yeah, it wasn't a common practice 20
It
years
wasn't
ago.
common practice back then.
Right.
So, so a lot of these books got slabbed, and they would have like removable ticks on them, and creases and folds and things of that nature. And those are pretty easy to tell, visually as well. So
Right.
yeah, it's
Yeah, no, I know when I first started collecting, I would buy most of my books, like I said, at a convenience store, but I would there was a local comic shop that I'd go to at the time. And I don't ever remember anybody ever talking about, cleaning or pressing a book, in the 80s. So yeah,
Sure.
If you have books that are slabbed from, even probably, in the 90s, they probably, some could benefit from a clean or a press. Yeah.
Sure. And there's certain people that feel that like cleaning and pressing is technically considered restoration. That's probably a topic for a different time as well. But I think that as long as it's done properly, it is possible to enhance how a book looks with the clean and press. And if you do it properly, you can do it without damaging the book. I mean, a heat press technically will reduce the what they call the useful lifespan of a book, and basically what that means, it's basically the useful life of the paper itself.
Okay.
And you can go to, like, you have all these, obviously there's all these documents that we have from hundreds of years ago that are still around and still being preserved to some degree. So like the useful life of, let's say, the useful life of a comic book could be, if it's preserved properly and stored properly, could be what, 200-300 years maybe. But so a press, it has been determined, I guess, somehow that a proper heat press can actually reduce the useful life of the paper of a comic book. But I think it's by like maybe 17 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
I actually researched this, and that's why I know this. But so you take if a press is going to reduce the useful life of a comic book by 17 years, for example, so instead of it lasting, let's just say 200, let's just use the 200-year example. Instead of it lasting 200 years before it literally starts, and the useful life means that the pages are still supple and you can still look at it and hold it without it literally just crumbling in your hands. Right. So if you reduce that from 200 years and you reduce it by 17 years, it's still a reduction, but not enough,
Right, that we would see it in our lifetimes, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So and that that's probably a fair trade-off from the standpoint of you're actually preserving the book by pressing it and cleaning it. So it might not even last 200 years if you didn't give it a clean and a press. So it's kind of a trade-off as far as that goes. So,
what about, I've heard some things about paper, muscle memory or paper memory, right? So sometimes if you clean and press or press a book, that over time it could revert back to, if it had a crease or a wave in the paper, that over time, years after the press, that it could revert back.
Yeah, that's called regression, and which does happen sometimes. Typically, regression happens when you don't press a book properly. Because technically, if you think about it, the book would have started out, from the, when it was manufactured, it was fairly flat or whatever, and then over the years, it it could get some creases or some spine ticks, what have you. Well, actually, if you're reverting a book back to its original condition, you're basically bringing it back to how it looks when it was new. So regression is really only an issue if the anomaly has been in the book for decades, like whether a crease or a fold or what have you. If you press that book, but you don't press it, and that's where heat comes in. That's where heat is important, because you really can't, in my estimation, you really can't cold press a book properly and remove all the regression in it. The regression is more than likely going to occur in a book that has not been heat pressed, because the heat is actually what it takes to kind of change the pulp is what paper's made out of.
Right.
You need to kind of change that pulp and get it soft again. Whether it's through humidity, adding humidity or whatever. Change that pulp and then press it with heat, and that actually kind of restores restores all the fibers and kind of makes everything kind of come back together a little bit.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm not explaining it properly, but hopefully you kind of get the general idea.
So so it sounds like depending on the proper temperature or amount of heat and the amount of time that you press as well.
Yeah, if you press a book for 180 degrees for 4 minutes, as opposed to 150 degrees for 15 minutes, for example, the odds of regression occurring are going to be a lot greater with that first book that was only pressed for 2 or 3 minutes with high heat.
Okay.
Because it's going to be the little longer temps at a lower heat are going to keep regression from occurring the best. Because you're actually changing the paper. Obviously letting it sit in a press for however long as well after it cools down. That's also very important too.
So what about, I know like CGC, for example, has a pressing service. So why, give me a little bit of why would somebody go to you as opposed to, I've never used CGC pressing. I've had books slabbed. You've actually cleaned and pressed some books for me. But what's the difference or what's the benefit, say, using somebody independently or maybe even a CGC service?
I think the biggest difference between the two would be the fact that if you send a book to CGC or CBCS for them to press, you lose all control of that book as soon as it leaves your hands and gets in the mail and gets sent to them. You lose all control of that book, right? And you're literally not going to see it again until it's delivered back to your doorstep after it's already been cleaned and pressed and graded. And I've always felt that if you actually are able to find somebody that you can trust and that you can have a rapport with, that makes a lot more sense. For example, I have people send me books, and a week later, after I already have the books, they might send me a message inquiring about one of the books, and they might be concerned about the back corner of a certain book or whatever, and I'm actually able to go and take that book and literally look at it while I'm talking to them, and then explain to them, what I might do to try to alleviate that problem, or whereas if you send a book off to a pressing service, you're not going to have that luxury of being able to do that. You can't call them.
Yeah, you're not going to have their feedback. Right.
You can't call them or email them a week later and say, that Fantastic Four 49 I sent you guys last week. Can you take a look at it and let me know what you think about the bottom rear corner? You know what I'm saying? Right. You're not able to do any of that. So you have so much more control over the books when you have an independent person do it that you can trust. And then plus, I'm always available to, I like to send, if it's just a few books, I like to do before and after pictures to send to the customer. And if it's a larger amount of books, at the very least, I'll do like a nice video. Like when I'm all done with them, I'll just do a nice video of each book and what they look like. And I'll give that to the customer. And you wouldn't have any of that with
you're checking a website for status of where your books are when you send, once
exactly.
you send them.
And you won't see them again until you get them back. And by then it might be, by then it's normally too late to do anything about it, so.
Right.
And so there's certain other benefits, to having somebody that you and trust press books. I mean, a lot of it's just simply kind of the handling of the books. If I have a lot of people that literally I'll kind of meet somewhere and they'll literally hand deliver their books to me because they're really concerned about, they've got all these books that are really valuable to them and they've never had them worked on before, so they're really concerned about shipping them. I can actually literally just kind of go out of my way to meet them somewhere so they can give me their books.
Right.
And
so
you can't do that.
Physical handoff as opposed to
just mailing them to complete strangers, right? So
yeah, no, I think it is. I think the first time you're ever mailing a book, and whether you've sold it or you're sending it to somebody, it's and if you've never really packed one up, you're at the mercy of the post office. And
Sure.
I've heard the horror stories, people folding the package and putting it in a mailbox and things like that. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. And some of the other recent, I've heard some stories about even just the quality at, say, CGC, where there's a piece of hair in the slab when they've gotten a book back, or a crumb, or something like that, which is kind of amazing to think that people at a service somewhere are eating around books or things like that.
Exactly.
So there's plenty of horror stories out there.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why they hired 500 additional employees not too long ago. I mean, I would imagine most of those people are not going to be new graders. A lot of people are concerned about the long wait times because of the grading aspect of it. Well, hiring 500 new graders isn't necessarily going to speed everything up, because you still have all the people in the mailroom that actually open the comics, and you've got the people that are pressing them. You've got this huge room with all these presses, and you've got literally just the people that are responsible for bringing the books to and from different departments. All of that is really important, right? How many times has someone gotten a book that had damage to it, but they know that it wasn't damaged when they sent it off? Well, a lot of that could be occurring just from the simple fact of them not opening the packages properly. Maybe
right.
You'd like to think that they're going to be hiring a lot. They're going to be hiring a lot more people to open the books and train them to open them properly, and so that they're careful, and people that can properly transfer the books from shipping to pressing to the grading departments, and all that is.
Yeah, it's the whole handling, right?
Involved process, right?
Yeah,
and it requires the right amount of people and the right amount of properly trained people to do all that properly. It's almost like an anthill, right? You've got all these ants inside that are all trying to accomplish the same thing, but it's just kind of weird. It's kind of weird to me to think that there's people opening all these packages, just ripping into them, whatever, and they're just stacking up all these comic books, and then maybe putting them in a cart or in a bin, and then taking them somewhere else. And all of that is necessary, but it needs to be done properly, as far as treating the books properly, and not incurring additional damage because you're not doing that properly.
Right.
So I think a lot of the hiring they're doing, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of additional graders, but there's also going to be a lot of additional mailroom people and presser people in the pressing room. And so yeah, that's all part of it, right?
Yeah, it's the whole end-to-end process, right? Yeah, from the mailing until that book gets graded and slabbed and returned back to you. So yeah, exactly. No, definitely agree. So why don't we talk a little bit about your services? So what kind of give people a breakdown, and I'll obviously include a link to your Facebook group. So if anybody's interested, finding out more or inquiring about services, they can do that. But generally, what does it cost? What's the turnaround time, or whatever you're comfortable discussing?
Yeah, it's generally speaking, I'll charge anywhere from, let's say, $16 to $25 to work on a book. I generally will not press a book without at least giving it a modicum of dry cleaning first.
Okay.
And dry cleaning could entail just taking a nice dry clean microfiber towel and just cleaning the cover real well. Or it might also entail using a magic eraser, which is a little more abrasive, but works well as far as dry cleaning a book. And of course, using any of those items to clean a book, but especially like an item like a magic eraser, that's going to require some level of experience, right? So I don't want to sit here and tell everybody to run out and buy magic erasers and start working, just cleaning the heck out of your books. It still requires quite a bit of know-how to be able to do it properly and professionally. but that being said, I typically will not press a book without giving it a dry clean first, because if you go and press a book and there's fingerprints or hair or dirt or oils or dust or anything on the cover, all of that is going to get pressed down into the cover if you don't clean it first. And
Right.
although most of those anomalies can be removable or are removable with a second or third press, you really want to stay away from having to press a book 2 or 3 times because of something you didn't do first, right? You don't want to, if you're pressing a Silver Surfer #1 and you didn't clean it first, and let's say there was like 3 or 4 small pieces of dirt on the cover, you most of the time you don't see that dirt until you pressed it, and then there's these huge divots in the cover. So you gotta try to clean that dirt off of there and then press it again. And sometimes those divots, if they're a little too large, they're not gonna come out with a second press.
Okay.
There might always be a tiny footprint left of one of those, and of course you don't want to have that on any book, really, let alone like a really valuable book. So all my prices include a clean and press. And again, it's not cleaning could be something as simple as a towel, or it could be something as involved as a like a kneadable eraser or a magic eraser. And then so I'll charge a little more for really valuable comics, just because there's just more liability involved for me, like working on an expensive book.
Okay.
So I try to, and I just obviously, that I just do that to help offset my other costs as far as insurance and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. Good. Yeah. No, we'll certainly keep. I'll include a link so that people want to find you on Facebook. They can do that.
Sure.
What anything else that you want to mention or discuss about cleaning and pressing, or generally about comic books? I know. Well, the one thing I do know you do is I've seen you mask out. So if a book is going in for signature, you can kind of do a masking with some painter's tape to make sure that the signature gets
signature window. Yeah.
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 So that's something you've done. Yeah.
I enjoy doing signature windows, just because it's really cool to think about a signature window, right? Because let's say you're sending a book in to be signed by I don't know, any like Neil Adams, for example.
Okay.
Like if I was sending a book to Neil Adams and I wanted him to sign it in a certain spot, I would obviously, you can put the signature window right where you would want him to sign it, and then that also allows you you can write information on the cover of on the sleeve over the tape. Preferably, you don't want to do it when the book is still in there, but you can kind of customize what you want. You can say what kind of color you would like as far as the marker. But what's even cooler is that you can literally leave a personal note for that person. And the chances are they might, if it catches their eye, they're going to look at it, glance at it, and kind of read it. And so what would be cooler than, what's cooler than leaving a personal note for like Neil Adams, like, especially if you grew up like loving his work, you can leave a nice personal note for him, and he might look at it and might, and chances you might even get like a free remark out of it from him if he likes, if he likes what you said about him or whatever, he might do something extra, instead of the signature. So that's always a good thing too, right?
Yeah, no, I've seen you, post a few things on your Facebook group about that with the signature, window, and it was the first time I've ever seen it. I thought it was a great idea. Certainly, if you're sending in a book to get signed, having the signature in a good spot on the cover, maybe where it doesn't cover a character, or where it's in a good, a light spot with a dark Sharpie might, it could really pop.
Exactly.
And I've seen some signatures on books where I couldn't even tell it was a signature because it was in a dark,
couldn't really even see it. Yeah. And then
a black Sharpie on a dark spot on the book.
And then every once in a while you'll see a signature like over someone's head or whatever. And
right.
And it's just because if they get in a hurry or whatever, they might just do that inadvertently. Whereas if if you've got the signature window right where you're going to want it, that they're they're forced to sign right there.
They're locked in. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to do proper signature windows.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, definitely. If people, like I said, check out Jim's page, and you'll see some of the examples. And like I said, I've never had a book signed. I have seen books, come in with signatures that are just, like I said, some you can see very clearly, and others I had to triple check it to see where the signature was. So that window I thought was a great idea. Certainly if you're going to spend the time and money and effort to get a book signed, you definitely want it in a good spot on the cover. So
sure. And the signature the proper signature can actually add value to a book, if that's what you're interested in having done. But a bad signature can just as easily devalue the book. Right. So it's pretty, I think it's pretty important as far as doing the proper signature windows and all that from that aspect. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely agree. So anything else that you want to mention about, pressing or cleaning or collecting in general?
No, I think it's, I think it's, there has been I guess there is an ongoing debate about whether like new comic books need to be pressed or not. And I think it's possible to buy new comic books and not have them pressed, and they can still come out okay, from a grading aspect. Okay. But I think, from the sheer standpoint of investing in a clean and press, it's if you're looking at $10 to $15 to $20 to clean and press a comic book, I think that it's a fairly minimal investment for what you're doing, because basically what you're doing is you're increasing the odds of getting 9.8s or high grade. You're increasing the odds of getting a high graded book exponentially if you do have it clean and pressed, as opposed to just leaving it to chance. Right. So it just just your odds increase drastically as far as getting a high graded book if you incorporate cleaning and pressing into that scenario. Right. So yeah, totally agree. I mean, sure. Yeah, why wouldn't you, if you're going to have a book graded, why wouldn't you have it cleaned and pressed unless you think that it has no defects, that you think it's already a 9.8 candidate, and you just but for any other book, I would certainly want to have it cleaned and pressed before I sent it in for grading. So that makes a lot of sense. Sure. So what about in your personal collection? Who's your, who are your favorite characters? What's who? For me, it's Spider-Man, but who are the books or characters that you collect? Yeah, of course, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan as well, as are most people. But I was really when Giant Size X-Men came out, and I'm fortunate enough, I guess, to be old enough to remember when that came out. That kind of changed everything for me. I was 10 years old at the time, and I just remember seeing that book for the first time, and it just something popped inside of me, and I just I couldn't get enough of them, the new X-Men, or at the time. So I've always, ever since then, I've been a huge X-Men fan, and a huge fan of the mutant books and all that. And so yeah, I've it's basically Spider-Man and the X-Men. Okay. And I know you've worked on some X-Men books recently. I think I saw an X-Men #1, and I think maybe even some Giant Size as well, right? You've done some. Oh yeah, I'm actually working on a couple right now, and just actually sent one off this morning as well. That was actually a crack, and re-clean and repress and submit. So yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah, that must be fun, just to get your hands on a book like that, and be honored to kind of get that book, and that the person's trusting you to oh my gosh, do a good job. That's the best compliment anyone can pay me, is sending me their, not only the X-Men ones and the Avengers ones and all that, but really any book that they've had, that someone has that is several decades old and in really good condition, for them to package those books together and send them to me, being hopeful that I can improve them for them. That's the biggest compliment that someone can pay me is
Right.
having,
They're trusting you,
me to do that.
trusting you with something that could be, whether it's very meaningful or memory, or maybe they're looking to flip it to increase the monetary value. But there's a lot of different reasons. But I can see that.
And like anything else in life, I'm not perfect, and there might be some expectations that somebody might have that I'm not able to meet, for one reason or another. But I always try to do my best, and I try to treat every book literally better than if it was my own. So I've had to, it's that's kind of a learning process as well, to just dealing with somebody and finding out exactly what they want, what they expect out of their books,
right?
Or what they expect from you regarding their books. That maybe brings us back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as if you send a book to somebody that you maybe that and that you trust, that's going to alleviate a lot of that. Whereas if you just send it off to a grading company and have them press your books, that takes a lot of that away. So
I've had that experience, not from the cleaning and pressing, but more from the, I send it off to CGC, and now, like I said, I'm just basically looking at a website to get updates every once in a while. And I had a few books that were just sitting in, waiting for grading for like about 8 weeks, or maybe even 10 weeks. And it was just like, all right, well, I don't know what's going on with these books. And it's kind of, you're kind of hopeless, just waiting for, get a confirmation email that they're sending them back. So
sure.
Definitely. And so if you could buy one book, if I could write you a check for, any amount of money, and you could purchase one book, what book would it be?
Well, I mean, that's, I would have to say probably Amazing Fantasy 15 or a Fantastic Four #1.
Okay.
And those obviously, those are, kind of unattainable, not only from a monetary standpoint, but there's not that many of them left out there.
Few
but,
copies, right?
I would think, like Giant Size X-Men #1, that's always a really good investment. An Incredible Hulk 181, that book is never going to lose value. I mean, I guess the list, I could go on and on, about that, but those are a couple examples, I suppose.
All right. So anything else that you want to mention or talk about?
No, I just, I'm always available. If someone wants to join my group, I'm always available to, answer, questions for anyone. But, it can be either on the group, or, people can always, instant message me. I'm always available to, help someone out if they have questions about whether they should buy a comic book or not, or whether it's priced right, or what, so I'm always available to help out wherever I can. So
okay. And I've had that experience myself. I've been probably in your Facebook group for over a year, and I know anytime I've had questions, I've sent you some direct message about questions, and you've always answered them, and I always see the feedback and tips that you post in the Facebook group. So I like I said, I will include a link to it, and then hopefully some people will join, because
sure.
It's really just being part of the group and just watching the other people that post questions to you and you answering them, or some, like I said, some of the tips that you post have been very helpful. So I'll definitely.
Yeah, and I try to, frankly, some people have given me a hard time because I have a group and I give tips on things and all that. But I've always thought it's better for people to have more information rather than less information. It makes no sense to be secretive about things. I mean, so any tips that I give are always obviously just suggestions, and just but I think that I just think it's important for people to have more information than less information. So I guess maybe maybe I do that at my own peril sometimes, but I still think I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and
Yeah,
keep
no,
getting
and I
out
mean
there. And
that's been the experience I have since I've been part of your group. Is it's very informative, right? If you're a collector
sure.
at any level, I think, like you said, you want to keep your books in the best condition as possible, whether it's for personal reasons or for flipping or whatever it may be. And like I said, I've always found the group very informative, and just, it's interesting to see what somebody else may post and what books they have. I mean, that's part of it too. As a collector of comic books, you're always interested in seeing, what other people are collecting or what they value. But there's just a lot of great information that you provide, and people that are in the group provide, within your Facebook group. So
yeah, and the more information somebody has regarding their comic book, as far as like different ways to clean it or how it should look after it's cleaned or whatever, someone doesn't even have to actually apply any of those tips or whatever to their own comic books. But if they at least have that knowledge of what it takes to clean a book certain ways, what have you, that's going to give them more insight as to how their books should look before they send them off to be graded, or how they look when they get them back after being graded, right? So
right.
More knowledge is always going to be better than knowledge.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, that's what I'm trying to increase my knowledge, so that when I'm looking at raw books, there are some Spider-Man, I have a small run of Spider-Man books, but I'd like to collect. So I'd like to pick up eventually some of the, the key, some of the key issues, some of the Silver Age, Spider-Man. But I'm really want to increase my knowledge, so I understand. All right, if I'm looking at a book that maybe has some, spine ticks or things, could that be pressable? Because maybe I can get that book at a good deal, and then now with a press really increase the value, for my collection. So
that's a great example of how more knowledge is better than less knowledge. Because it gives you the know-how to potentially pick up a book for less money, because you're going to know that some of those defects are correctable.
Right.
And that's a great thing, to have that, to be able to have that knowledge.
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable enough to say, I know that can be, some things you can pretty much tell, all right, that a crease or a line that might be able to be pressed, but I'm still looking to increase my knowledge before I, go to drop, a couple $100 on a raw book that I think maybe could be even worth more. But
I'm always here to help you with that too, Ryan.
Yes. Yeah, no, the group, like I said, the Facebook group has been very, very, very helpful to me. So
great.
Okay. So great. I appreciate, I really appreciate you coming on. I know we've talked about doing this for a while, so I'm glad it finally happened. And, I appreciate your time and your knowledge, for, coming on tonight. So, hopefully, you'll have some new people joining the group shortly.
Sure. And then maybe next time we can talk about more in depth about some other issues that people might have concerns about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can open it up. I know this is kind of your first time doing a video like this. So, maybe next time we can open it up, maybe take some questions from the chat and kind of go from there. But yeah, I wanted to kind of introduce you to slowly.
Definitely be interesting viewing, if nothing else.
Yes. Okay. Well, great. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks to everybody who's in the chat. Posting some of the comments and that. I really appreciate you guys, and Jim, thanks again for joining us, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
My pleasure, Brian. Anytime.
All right. Take care. Have a good night, everyone.